Stay tuned to the end of this video for a special message from our supporters. Hello and welcome to Let's Talk FGO Wanted, everybody, the show where we let you know if you want to roll that 5-star. Let me do you a favor today and tell you about our new SSR Caster. If this is your first Let's Talk FGO Wanted, the basic structure of this video is going to be as follows. We're going to break down a unit's real-life history and folklore, where the characters are drawn from in real life. We're going to talk about their lore in Fate, capital L, if they have any. Then we're going to talk about their mechanics, what they do in the game of FGO, Fate Grand Order. And also check in with their raid-up rarity, how frequent those raid-ups are, and other fun facts to let you know what to do so you can make informed decisions on what servants to wear to the ball. Wait, what? So today we're going to be talking about Miss Crane, and that is her name. That is as written in the OG. And Miss Crane is lifted from Japanese folklore, specifically the story which is usually titled Tsuru no Onagaishi, literally, Crane's Return of a Favor. If you ever hear any reference to Returning of a Favor, it may or may not be deliberately drawn from this one. So, this follows a pretty common folklore type, usually referred to as Animal Bride, where the protagonist helps out an animal who becomes a beautiful woman who marries him. This is motif B600-B699, nice, marriage of a person to an animal, in Thompson's Motif Index of Folk Literature. If you were curious, yes, there is a code system for it. Yes, this fills me with joy. And her profile on FGO calls this out as Dobutsu Hontan, Grateful Animal's Tale. But yes, very common typology, archetype of folkloric story. Now, the actual story of Crane's Return of a Favor is very simple. There is a man. He goes out and saves a crane, which has been shot by hunters, and nurses it back to health. Afterward, a beautiful young woman comes up to him, shows up at his house, and says she is his wife. The man claims to be too poor to support them. He doesn't have time for a wife, so she provides a sack of infinite rice to keep them fed. No matter how many scoops of rice you take out, it stays full, etc., etc. Then, the following day, she says she's going into the back room to make something, and the man must not enter. 7 days later, at least in the version I read, she emerges with a beautiful piece of silken clothing, but looks thinner, unhealthier, and tells her husband to sell it at the market. He goes out, he sells it, the two are now wealthy. They have a lot of cash, it's good, he's got the support he needs. So after this, the wife goes into the back again to make another garment, but curious or greedy, depending on the exact text. Like I said, this one's a very famous archetypal folklore, so there's a lot of retellings. Anyway, her husband spies on her. He sees that his new wife is the crane he saved. Shocking, I know. And now that he knows her true identity, she must leave. Very, very typical for this type of story. There is also another variant of this story known as Suru Nyobo, literally crane wife, which follows a slightly different theme, but still very similar. The man marries a crane in disguise. She weaves garments from her feathers, and this makes her ill. Follows a pretty similar typology here. But in this case, when the man discovers her true identity and the nature of her illness, he demands she stop because he's very concerned for her. It's not healthy. The crane wife then replies that she's doing it for love. Her husband claims that love can exist without sacrifice, but, to quote this, he who lives without sacrificing for someone else doesn't deserve to be with a crane. Basically telling you the moral of the story, all love is about sacrificing for someone else, and that if you aren't willing to sacrifice, then how can you truly be in love, etc., etc. And there's also like a half dozen variants of this folktale in Japan alone. Not even talking about, all the European ones or other variations that are out there. But the crane one is the most common and popular in Japan. It is, remarked on as like one of the signature folktales of Japanese culture. There are a couple more that are reported in Japan that do have to do with birds, though, so we can fill out a bit of time here. One of them is called the Copper Pheasant Wife. In this case, the wife doesn't weave, but she provides fletching for arrows, which her husband then sells. And the husband doesn't look on his bride. She just leaves after the favor is completed. She does him a solid and goes. And then there's another variant, which is just titled the Bird Wife. Very demonstrative, I know. The bird in question is a wild goose. In this variation, she weaves unprompted by the husband. He doesn't say anything about them being poor. And this goes on for a bit until she vanishes and is found in the local pond. She says for her husband to use the money from selling the cloth to raise their child and flies away. So that one, I guess, just assumes that she was out there weaving to support her family for a long time, because they had a kid at least. So, Now, when we get to lore, there's not really a lot to build on here. Very classic archetypal character and is mostly first mentioned in FGO, but there are a couple of specific notes we can hit here. Her profile does explicitly call her not just a weaver, but a tailor, so she adjusts outfits to completion. She does not just weave the robe, she will also fit and adjust the size of the robe. Not present in a lot of the versions of the folktale, but just a good extra detail to work into there. And any further story stuff would be big spoilers for her role in the upcoming Grail concert event, so we're going to hold off on that one. Tune into our podcast, Let's Talk FGO, every week to see how we feel about that one. She's obviously a bonus servant in that, so she's a big deal. She's also going to be a bonus servant for Tunguska, so keep an eye out for that. I don't know if she's directly involved in the story, but she is an animal-type servant, so there is that. But this is not the first time Miss Crane has been mentioned. There are a couple of previous takes which are meant to be about her. Tamamo mentions Miss Crane all the way back in Extra. It's part of her My Room dialogue in that game, which makes sense as one of the other common Grateful Animal Tale variants is just called the Foxwife. So they are kind of thematically connected, and it makes sense. I couldn't find any detail, and I'm not going to dig up the entire Extra script, but if somebody knows, we can figure out if Miss Crane was just mentioned as a folktale Tamamo knows, or if they're explicitly pen pals, because they might be email pals. Also, Miss Crane was alluded to back in Sparrow Inn. I believe she was under the alias Oya there, but there was a Crane mentioned who worked there as a weaver and then suddenly fled in the moonlight, possibly after some of those naughty little sparrows looked at her while she worked. Alrighty, let's break into those mechanics. So, Miss Crane is an SSR caster with very low attack and very high HP for that slot. Basically, she is in the number 2 or number however many SSR casters there are, don't at me, under or above Scheherazade. So, pretty close to the lowest attack and the biggest HP for SSRs. Shocking absolutely no one. She's quick, arts, buster, triple arts, with higher hit counts, so lowered NP gain. That's not really a problem with the way her kit is designed, but it is something to keep in mind. Now, her Noble Phantasm is pretty unique, so we're going to break it down first. Number 1, you need at least 20 stars to activate this NP. They are not consumed, as far as I personally remember and can read from the internet, but you need them to activate it. When activated, her NP gives the servant who is frontmost in the lineup, so farthest left in your setup, who isn't her, so if she is in the front row, this doesn't affect herself, but it gives that ally attack up based on the NP level from 20 to 40%, and 30% NP damage up for 3 turns, and then a 30 to 50% battery based on your overcharge. Miss Crane will then yeet herself to the farthest available slot in your reserve, moving your frontmost reserve unit in. So basically, if, say, she is in slot 2, she will give the buffs to whoever servant is in slot 1. She will then go all the way to slot 6. Everybody else moves up. So whoever was in slot 4, your first reserve slot, moves up to fill her slot. This also, by the way, resets your command card counting. So you can get some funny stuff in there if you were the kind who counts command cards. This is kind of fundamental to her kit, but we're going to run through the rest of her skills and stuff and talk about your overall strategy in a second. So her first skill gives everybody but her 1 turn of invul. It gives everybody else also 50% star gen up for 3 turns, and you gain stars, 5 to 10, per ally with a costume. Servants who own a costume dress, costume-owning servants, however you want to rate that trait. Now, note, this is just whoever has the trait in the code. You don't have to actually unlock their costume to make it count, just they have to be a servant who has a costume. It's a weird bit of synergy. But ideally, when this skill is maxed out, this guarantees you get enough stars to fire her NP. Her second skill is a 50 to 100% battery on self, thus why you don't actually care about her NP gain levels. But it costs her 200? 2k HP. I'm going to leave that edited in. I goofed that up, but there it is. 2k HP. Note, this can't kill you. And it also gives allies who are not her 3 turns of taunt. Technically, it is a 500% chance to inflict 300% target rate up, but it taunts the other 2 servants. Her final skill gives a targeted ally increased star absorption for 3 turns, 30% crit damage for 3 turns, and makes them immune to instant death for 3 turns, but it also deals 1k damage to Miss Crane. I believe this also cannot actually kill her. Her passes are pretty simple. She's only got the 2. She's got a special territory creation, which gives her an arts up you would expect, and also a star generation up on herself, and a special item construction, which, when she's on the field, gives the whole party 10% buff success. So, Miss Crane is another entry in our support caster lineup. She generally takes a neutral slot up with Waver, though obviously while Waver has kind of stall potential with his NP to debuff enemies and generally is used for his broad buffs to the whole squad, though obviously Discerning Eye only goes on one servant, Miss Crane's a little more focused on one person, or at least not herself. She gives you attack up, crit up, NP damage ups, and NP gain and battery stuff, which are all agnostic to card types, and that's good. Ideally, you want to pair her with servants who have costumes, so she can always find the time to generate the stars she needs to NP, but you can use other methods for that. We'll discuss that a little bit in a second. Miss Crane's primary advantage over more focused supporters is that proccing her NP is very easy, and she is self-cleaning, as we might say, similar to using Arash or Chen Gong to bring in new back row members without using the plug suit. Miss Crane can dump all her buffs onto the team, rotate herself out to let another supporter come in. This means that your damage potential on later turns is much higher, but now you have to be aware of your team order and who is placed where to make it work. The basic simple strategy is much like how you might use an Arash to, have you set up your first turn attack or have Arash fire his NP, blow up a wave so you can rotate somebody in naturally and keep building on future stuff. Miss Crane can, pour all of her stuff onto a servant and go home. In general, it does not really matter who you pair Miss Crane with. Her buffs are generically useful, and you probably want to stack her with whatever your preferred rotation of the classic casters is. Merlin, Scotty, Castoria for your different card types, put a Waver in the mix, whatever. Obviously, there are then, future units that come in that do support. You've got Summer Scotty, you've got Lady Avalon, you've got the very soon upcoming Konskaya of Light for other Buster support. You've got that mixture with Oberon strats that I'm sure we'll be talking about in the not-too-distant months. Stuff like that. But in general, you can put her with whatever damage dealer you like, because generally nobody in this game will say no to attack up, crit up, and NP damage up. There are a couple of characters with non-damaging NPs that's kind of wasted on like a Super Orion comp, for instance. But in general, those buffs are always good. You're going to be proccing them. Now, she has all the tools to do her own combo if you run her with two costume-owning servants, so they make the best fit, but you can make it work otherwise. I would also bring up the fact that I actually, mentioned Arash or Chen Gong strats. You can absolutely still use those guys to blow up earlier waves if you're doing 3-turn farming comps and stuff like that, and cycle in even more supports. Now, for CEs, things are going to get a bit tricky. If you want to use maximum use, I would say make sure to pair her with a CE that gives you stars right out the gate, so she can immediately NP, set up buffs, get the fuck out of there, and presumably NP chain to whoever is actually clearing out, the waves. Now, most of these don't do the full 20, but some do, especially older ones. It kind of seems like they're rotating out the 20, but there's a few that are coming up. Recently released ones include the unmanipulatable ones, or whatever we translated at, the event CE from the Akihabara event. That gives you a full 20. And from last year's summer, with a rerun coming up somewhere in the not-too-distant future, Hide Hunter also does that. And the classic for this, if you've been playing long enough and have it, is Golden Carp. That's a 50% battery and 20 stars, so even at level 1 on her battery skill, she can instantly NP, because you will start with 20 stars when she enters the field, and she can do at least 50% battery. Sadly, her own Bond CE isn't that good. I think it would be a great opportunity if it was, but it's not. It raises NP gen for herself and for costumed allies with a costume trait, while she's on the field only, so I get what they're going for, but it's kind of unnecessary. And for our last little bit of miscellaneous stuff, Ascension mats are pretty normal, but she does need some rainbow yarn, so keep an eye out for that one. Her skills also need more yarn and some mirrors, and she has a high demand for skill levels, so keep all that in mind. Obviously, I mentioned earlier, but mechanically, Miss Crane will be a bonus servant for the Grail Concert and for the Tunguska event, so that's when she's got extra stuff, though obviously bonus damage is not really of a concern to a unit like this. Her primary banner will be on the Grail Concert we got to look out for, and also for whatever version of 25 million downloads we get, she's on that banner as well, or those banners, I should say, technically. And obviously, as a limited SSR, she will appear on all future Lucky Bag summon campaigns in some fashion, if you are curious to check her out later. That said, she doesn't seem to show up a lot, so I'm very interested to see the actual event, and see if that is more due to or in spite of her coverage in the event, because it kind of feels like she could be in a little more. We'll see. But that's what we got today. Peace out, everybody. I'm going to go dance in the pale moonlight. If you are curious about the Grail concert event, you can go into our recent videos and check out the pregame I did for that on our podcast, Let's Like FGO, where I kind of broke down the whole event and everything, so check that one out. Other than that, we're going to go ahead and skedaddle on out of here. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more videos. And also ring the bell so you always know when we post the video. Do all that engagement stuff. Get your videos. You can also leave your comments down below or on our Discord channel, which has a roll thread. But you can respond, of course, with how your Catalyst luck works. Everybody in the comments always swears by wanted as a Catalyst. Ding! You can also join our channel memberships through the join button or link below. And also support us on Patreon to get this video early. Stay tuned in a sec for a special message to our patrons. And a quick reminder, this episode was brought to you by our patrons like Adam DeHarp, Blacklist OG, Call Me Zed, Carlos, Dragon, Ferris, Flightless Icebird, Jeremy Vasquez, JDV9000, Jester the Fae, Jonathan Sandoval, Starlight, Legendary Boss Hunter, Regent Raptor, Rise of Kenji, Rogue Robin, Sharvor, Sean Pryor, some guy named Bob, and Varian the Crow. If you like what we do and want to see us do more, consider supporting us on Patreon. Thank you for support as always, everyone.